probably know about the whole idea of composting. We're just kind of speeding up a natural ecosystem service that Mother Nature provides for us, where we have the organic materials coming into the pile, and then the microorganisms do their respiration and break things down, and we end up getting our compost. So the benefits of compost: it disposes of our waste, it adds organic matter back to the soil, and it improves the soil quality so that the plants can absorb water and absorb nutrients a little bit better. Works well as a mulch, but it's more of a soil amendment than a fertilizer. And we need to worry about the carbon-nitrogen ratio, our greens to our browns. If we don't quite get that ratio right, the compost pile may not work as well. And with the traditional compost, backyard compost pile, it usually kind of takes up a little bit of space. And here are just some pictures of things that you might see from diagrams on how to build a compost pile. But in some urban settings, we don't have that space. So we may turn to vermicomposting. And this is a type of composting that uses a species of earthworms and other microbes to decompose the food waste. And it's less space, usually less materials, and it can be done indoors, and it can reduce about 2/3 of your food waste that you have. It can also be used for your yard waste as well, depending on how big your container is. Generally speaking, these are a type of earthworm from Annelida, and then the class Cletellata. These are segmented worms that have a true body cavity. So they also have a crop that helps grind up those soil particles and the materials that they're eating. So it's important maybe to add a little bit of grit to your compost, but not any worm will do. These are the types of earthworms that live near or at the surface. They do not burrow into the ground. So they're called epigeic earthworms, and there's about 9,000 species of these worms, but only 7 species work for our compost bin for vermiculture. And the most common is the red wiggler, the Eosinea fetida. And there are a couple of others that will work, but this is the most common. Now, watch out for the common name red wiggler, because red wiggler is a common name. So it's applied to a lot of different kinds of worms, just like thistle is applied to a lot of different kinds of plants. So it is important to know that scientific name. The habitat that you want to provide for the worms, you want it to be dark and moist, have good ventilation. The temperature, you can see 55 to 77 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's kind of analogous to what our normal houses and garages are. So they don't have to have any extreme heat or coolness. You do not want to collect from nature. Try to buy from a reputable supplier or from someone who already has this kind of compost going on. You may end up with the wrong kind of worm. For example, our night crawlers actually digs a little bit deeper in the soil, and they only come out when it rains or at night. Those are not the kinds of worms that we want. So they actually have another classification. So make sure that you're getting the right kind of worms. And then you also need to think about your ratio of food waste. How much food waste do you generate in a week? And it should be about 2 pounds of food waste to about 1 pound of worms. So that should give you an idea of how many worms you need to purchase if you get that, or how big your system needs to be. These earthworms have a very short life cycle, but they also have a high fecundity rate. So they will reproduce and double their population in a very short time. You'll probably hardly ever see a dead worm in your bin, though, because they are mostly water. So as they die, that water gets absorbed through in the other material, and then you don't really see the casing anymore. When you set up your habitat, again, determine the size that you need. If you have about 1 pound of refuse per week, then you need about 1 square foot of surface area in the bin. And shallow is better than deep, because if it's deep, that adds weight, and that will kind of compress your compost and cut down on the airflow, and then that can be a problem for your bin. Keep it in a convenient place. You can keep these under your sink in the cabinet, under a desk or a table somewhere that's out of the way in a corner. You can keep it out in your garage, just wherever it's convenient for you to add your table scraps. provide the bedding, and the bedding can be shredded paper, cardboard, it can be leaves or straw, but you want to make sure that it's wet, not soaking wet, but you want to soak your materials for about 24 hours and then wring it out. So like it's a wet, so you squeeze your material, it feels damp, but you don't have water that's coming out of it. And then make it fluffy. The amount of moisture is one of the most common problems with vermiculture. So you do want to get this moisture right. And then kind of allow the bedding to kind of settle a little bit before you add the worms. When you are getting your bin going, you want to bury the food waste throughout the bin in different locations as you add stuff to it. And then about every 3 to 6 months, depending on how quickly it works, you'll just kind of move the compost to one side. You'll quit feeding it. And then when you add the new straw or your new bedding and add in your new waste, migrate out of it into the new bedding, and then you can harvest the compost from the other side. Just like in a regular compost, we don't want to add dairy or meat, and you also would want to avoid highly acidic or alkaline foods like oranges, grapefruits. I think you can use the rinds of those okay, but the actual pulp probably is not such a good thing because, again, they're a living creature and fluctuations in pH can cause a problem. But potato peelings, cantaloupes, watermelon rinds, eggshells, your flower bouquet that you may have gotten from the market, all of those can also be added to your bin to be recycled and used for compost. The benefits, you get better soil health, increased food and flower production. They're doing some research at Cornell University and they're seeing some improvements there. Reduced fertilizer costs. And then the picture here shows a resistance to damping off. And you can see the picture here on the left is with the vermicompost. This is without. So adding that biodiversity and microbes to your potting mix, using that vermicompost kind of helps with the resistance of that fungus. It also increases the water retention. And you can use this as an amendment that you add directly into the soil, or you can soak the castings in water and then use that for a drench or as a spray if you would like. You can also sell your things to bait shops or hatcheries. You can also sell the compost. So there are places where you can sell your product if you need to or if you want to. Common mistakes would be your soil moisture, overfeeding, and then just the ventilation. Those are just things you need to kind of watch out for. And those are citations. And then if you have any questions, you can let me know. But otherwise, thank you.